High above the city, perched atop the remains of a centuries-old cathedral, a solitary gargoyle kept silent vigil. Its granite skin was etched with deep grooves from centuries of wind and rain, and its stony muscles were tensed in eternal watchfulness. Night after night, it had guarded the rooftops of the bustling streets below, its stone wings spread in anticipation, though it never took flight. In the moonlight, passers-by would glance up, their eyes drifting over the gargoyle without much thought. They never sensed the subtle hum of magical power coursing through it, never saw the faint glow that sometimes flickered in the creature's marbled eyes. The gargoyle felt none of their stares, for it had not moved in decades, a silent sentinel among the crumbling arches and fractured statues. But that night was different. As the moon hung high and pale in the sky, a ripple of disturbance coursed through the city's hidden magical network. The gargoyle sensed it like a tremor, vibrating through the stone of the cathedral and into its own rigid frame. Something had been stolen. Something precious, something that was never meant to leave the hands of the guardians who protected humanity's fragile hold on new, potent technology. The gargoyle felt the weight of that disturbance pull at its core. It was a calling, and it knew its moment of stillness had come to an end. After centuries of silent watching, it shifted on its perch, dust clouding the air as stone scraped stone. Where once it was confined to a state of perpetual immobility, power now surged through its limbs, awakening it from centuries of slumber. The cathedral's rotting timbers creaked in protest as the gargoyle descended to the floor. Its taloned feet struck the marble with an echo that rumbled like distant thunder. With painstaking slowness, it tested its joints, rolled its shoulders, and stretched its wings for the first time in generations. Then, bending low, it pushed open the massive oaken doors with a force that sent centuries of cobwebs drifting through the moonlit air. Outside, the city glowed with neon lights and fluorescent signs. Cars zipped by, oblivious to the ancient being stepping onto the cracked sidewalk. It turned its head, scanning a world that had transformed drastically since it was last free to roam. Skyscrapers and concrete had replaced the pastoral fields that once lay outside the cathedral walls, and new machines hummed incessantly in the distance. This modern forest of steel and glass was alive with energies the gargoyle could hide. It felt the pulse of technology thrumming everywhere, weaving together cell signals, electricity, data streams, and glimpses of arcanic spells hidden behind everyday devices. The stolen artifact it had sensed, some form of advanced technology that the secret guardians had developed, was out there, falling into the wrong hands. The Guardians were an ancient sect that balanced the city's magical undercurrents with cutting-edge inventions. Their synergy of magic and science kept the city safe from darker forces lurking within the shadows. But now that equilibrium had been disturbed, and the gargoyle, awakened by centuries of unfulfilled duty, set its sights on retrieving the stolen tech before it could be manipulated for harm. Its first steps were awkward. The gargoyle stumbled, nearly colliding with a street lamp. A single, terrified pedestrian froze when he found this immense, winged creature in front of him. In the harsh glow of the streetlight, the gargoyle's weathered stone face appeared worn with experience far beyond human reckoning, but instead of crying out, the man merely took a tentative step back. Within the city's labyrinth of magic and secrets, perhaps bizarre sights were not so uncommon. The gargoyle clumsily spread its wings again, feeling a new sense of freedom and the burden of a new mission. Timid at first, it beat those stony appendages until it rose a few feet off the ground, scattering grit from the pavement beneath. Each stroke of its wings made the concrete quake slightly, and a gust of wind lashed at nearby debris. Finally, it soared, perhaps not gracefully, but with undeniable strength. Over rooftops and neon-lit billboards, it homed in on the faint magical signature the stolen device had left behind. Like a trail of phosphorescent breadcrumbs, the signature guided the gargoyle toward an industrial district on the city's outskirts. Darkness stretched across endless rows of silent warehouses and chain-link fences. A chill wind breathed between sporadic street lamps, whose dim light revealed the emptiness. But emptiness can be deceptive. The gargoyle knew that criminals, both mundane and supernatural, thrived in places like these, where prying eyes were few and law enforcement was stretched thin. Something flickered in the distance, a faint glow that danced among the cold steel structures. The gargoyle recognized it as the same energy signature that had awakened it from its stony slumber. With resolute purpose, it descended, landing atop a corrugated metal roof with a hollow echo. Beneath that roof, figures moved in the shadows, their hushed voices carrying a sense of urgency. The gargoyle peered down through grime-crusted skylights, watching as a group of individuals gathered around a strange device on a makeshift table. Their leader, an angular-faced woman in a long coat, paced in front of a cluster of flickering monitors. She tapped commands onto a tablet, occasionally glancing at the device with a mix of excitement and fear. The device itself looked like an amalgam of technology, a tangle of sleek metal parts, blinking lights, arcane symbols etched into silver plating, and a luminous crystal at its core that pulsed like a living heart. This was the stolen, delicate balance of science and magic, rumored to be capable of tapping into hidden dimensions of power. Their conversation was urgent but hushed. "We have to activate it before they notice," said one of the men. He reached out and began connecting cables to the device, which glowed brighter with every wire attached. The woman nodded, her expression intent. "The Guardians will do anything to get this back." She sneered. "But they're stuck in the old ways. They don't see the potential. We're going to change the city forever." She gestured to the group surrounding her, and more cables were attached to big power generators humming in the corner. Sporadic sparks flew from the device as though it was protesting. The gargoyle watched with a growing sense of alarm. If they succeeded in harnessing the artifact's energy without the Guardian's knowledge and control, the result could be catastrophic. Chances of stealth were slim, no matter how agile it was. A 7-foot gargoyle with stone wings wasn't inconspicuous, yet the gargoyle had no choice. It needed to intervene before these thieves managed to bring the device online. Carefully, it peered at the warehouse exterior, searching for a vantage point or a hidden entrance. A side door, slightly ajar, beckoned from below. The gargoyle leapt from the rooftop, wings snapping open to arrest its fall, and landed silently on the gravel. As it approached the door, it felt vibrations of energy intensifying behind the corrugated steel walls. With one precise push, it slipped inside the dark interior, hugging the shadows. Its eyes glowed faintly, adjusting in an instant to the dimly lit space. Various crates and stacks of metal beams provided cover, and a gargoyle moved with surprising grace for a creature carved from stone. A hiss of power cut through the stillness as the device crackled to life. The thief who had been hooking wires stood back nervously, glancing at flickering lights that now illuminated that corner of the warehouse. "It's working!" exclaimed the woman, voice trembling with adrenaline. "If we can stabilize the crystal matrix, we'll have a constant source of arcane energy to power every system we've developed. The city will belong to us." She began flipping switches on a console, and an unearthly hum resonated through the warehouse. The gargoyle felt the vibrations crawling under its rocky exterior, setting its nerves on edge. This artifact was never meant to be used in such a crude manner. The Guardians had developed it as a precisely measured conduit to be used under strict oversight. In reckless hands, it could unleash forces that neither mortals nor immortals could fully control. The gargoyle clutched at a metal beam, its claws leaving shallow gouges in the steel. Everything in its being told it to strike now. But from the other side of the crates it counted no fewer than 15 individuals, many armed with more than just guns. The gargoyle could detect talismans brimming with minor enchantments, lots of them improvised. This was no random gang. These people knew at least the basics of the arcane arts, or they wouldn't have stolen such technology in the first place yet. Hesitation was not an option. With each passing second, the device's power levels spiked higher, sending arcs of neon blue electricity coiling around the cables. Something had to be done. The gargoyle stepped into the open, letting out a resonant growl that jolted the thieves into immediate panic. Drawing upon the magic at its core, it summoned a flicker of protective energy around its body. Gunfire erupted, bullets ricocheting off the gargoyle's stone hide. The clangs rang through the cavernous space, echoing like hammer strikes on the marble floors of an ancient hall. The thieves quickly realized their normal weapons were barely effective, so a few of them raised glowing charms or hurled spells. Whip-like streams of magical energy slashed across the warehouse, leaving smoking gouges in the concrete. But the gargoyle pressed on, swiping with powerful claws. It knocked two attackers unconscious with a single blow that sent them crashing into a row of stored pallets. A third assailant tried to fling an arcane knife, a small dagger crackling with electricity. The blade skittered across the gargoyle's arm, leaving a shallow crack in the stone surface. Pain blossomed, a new sensation after all those centuries of stasis. But the gargoyle merely snarled and bared its fangs. It lunged, wings flaring, knocking the attacker off balance. With cold precision, it pinned them to the ground, leaving the unfortunate thief gasping for air. Around them, the hum of the device rose to a shrieking pitch, like 1,000 bees amplified in a tin can. Even the group's leader looked momentarily alarmed as the crystal pulsed dangerously bright. A swirl of multicolored sparks enveloped the apparatus, warping the air with heat and arcane distortion. The watchers pressed forward, determined to harness whatever power they could, but they were losing control. Their excitement had clearly outstripped their skill. The thief at the console yelled something incomprehensible as alarms began to blare on the monitors. The woman leader tried to manually lower the device's output, but the feedback was instantaneous and violent. A wave of forced magical energy exploded outward, sending half the group flying. Crates toppled, lights shattered, and the gargoyle braced itself against a sudden hot gust. A swirl of prismatic energy spiraled up from the core of the device, threatening to tear open a rift in the very fabric of reality. The woman staggered to her feet, eyes wide in disbelief. "We have to shut it down," she screamed, wrestling with the console. But the system was quickly bypassing her commands, responding instead to raw magic running rampant. The stolen artifact was in meltdown, fueling itself from the power lines they had connected, and it was ready to unleash something disastrous upon the city. Seeing the device spiral out of control, the gargoyle realized it had but one chance. It bounded across the warehouse, dodging tumbling debris and crackling streams of energy. The woman raised her pistol, a combination of modern barrel and arcane runes around the muzzle, and fired. A cluster of glowing bullets struck the gargoyle's shoulder, blasting chunks of stone from its form. Yet the gargoyle did not stop. It slammed into the console, scattering the monitors like leaves. Alarms wailed, screens flickered, and cables sparked wildly. The gargoyle shoved the woman aside with one massive arm, gripping the artifact's crystal and heart with its other hand. Layers of arcane wards swirled around that core, searing the gargoyle's palm with white-hot energy. Stone sizzled, cracked, and smoked. But the gargoyle tightened its grip. If it could redirect the artifact's formidable power, draw it inward, it might neutralize the threat, at least temporarily. Gritting what served as its teeth, the gargoyle let the potent energies flow into its body, forging a direct link between artifact and guardian. For a moment, it saw everything. Shimmering lines of magic threading through the city, the flow of neon lights, the undercurrent of hidden spells beneath mundane technology. And it saw the guardians, scattered across rooftops and sanctuaries, abiding by their ancient vows. The power was intoxicating. It promised unstoppable might. But the gargoyle had not awakened to bring destruction. It had awakened to protect. Squeezing the crystal, it channeled that power back into the ground, sending arcs of energy sizzling through the warehouse floor. The device fought against the gargoyle's control, but slowly, the swirling vortex overhead began to subside. The multicolored sparks dissipated into dimly glowing motes, drifting like embers until they winked out entirely. When the last spark fizzled, silence fell. Smoke and the stench of scorched metal filled the warehouse. A single flickering overhead lamp cast dancing shadows on the aftermath. Some of the thieves lay unconscious, while others groaned, pressing against twisted limbs or crawling away from the collapsed crates. The woman attempted to stand, but her injuries overtook her, and she slumped back down, looking at the gargoyle with hopeless resignation. The gargoyle released the device. Its stone palm scorched and cracked. The artifact clattered onto the remains of the console, flickered weakly, and then went dark. A hush of relief seemed to settle, tinged with the consequences of reckless ambition. Sirens wailed in the distance, likely prompted by the surge of lights and the unnatural thunder that had rocked the warehouses. The gargoyle knew that members of the Guardians would be coming as well. Those few humans working with them were typically disguised as first responders, performing their dual duty to protect the city from mundane and arcane threats alike. The gargoyle turned, scanning the aftermath. It felt something strange, a pang of sadness, an echo of loneliness. For centuries, it had watched humans go about their lives, never a part of the world below its perch. Now, drawn into confrontation, it realized how fragile humanity truly was. With all their technology and cunning, they could still be undone by forces they barely comprehended. As sirens grew louder, the gargoyle contemplated its next move. Leaving the artifact here would be irresponsible, yet taking it along might trigger further instability. A faint voice echoed in its mind, a memory from centuries prior, words passed down by the old Guardians. When uncertain, return to the Watcher's lair. Trust in unity. A small hidden courtyard behind the cathedral was said to contain a portal leading to the Guardian's sanctum. Even after all these years, that threshold might still be active. The gargoyle lifted the battered, unresponsive device, feeling the weight of it press upon its cracked limbs. With halting steps, it crossed the wrecked warehouse, ignoring the thieves, who could only stare in dread or relief. Once outside, it leapt into the sky, wings beating the night air, carrying it away from the wailing sirens and flickering red-blue lights. Dawn was close when the gargoyle returned to the cathedral spire. Time had worn away much of the building's magnificence, but the small courtyard behind it was still concealed by high walls and archways. The gargoyle landed there, stumbling from the pain of its wounds. Moss and creeping vines covered the stones, but beneath the growth, faint inscriptions of magical script remained visible. The gargoyle set the device on the altar-like pedestal in the center of the courtyard. Slowly, it traced its claw across the ancient runes, reactivating the portal that once connected this hidden spot to the Guardian's sanctum. At first, nothing happened. Then, a faint shimmer sparkled in the air, and the shape of a doorway began to form, a glimmering threshold leading to a vast chamber of arcane machinery and old-world artifacts. From beyond, a warm light spilled forth, and silhouetted figures appeared, robed in the same insignias that the gargoyle remembered from centuries past. The group moved swiftly to help. One figure, a tall woman with hair bound in a tight braid, approached the gargoyle and the device. Her expression was a mix of astonishment and gratitude. "You have returned," she whispered, understanding in her voice that the gargoyle had once stood guard here, watching over them from the cathedral heights. Gently she placed a hand on the gargoyle's scorched arm, the cracks in its stone surface radiating dull pain. "We feared the day you would need to intervene, but we're thankful you did." She motioned to her companions, and they carefully lifted the artifact onto a gurney outfitted with magical stabilizers. "We'll make sure it's contained properly," she said, turning back to the gargoyle. "We can also help heal you." "For a place inside for restoration, your sacrifice won't go unrewarded." The gargoyle questioned her with a silent tilt of its head, It felt exhaustion creeping in, as if centuries of immobility had caught up in a single night. The woman offered a sympathetic smile. "You're not alone," she said. "You never were. Let us share the burden." The gargoyle took a step forward, crossing the portal's threshold. At that moment, a wave of warmth and relief coursed through its stony frame, like stepping into a memory of home long forgotten. Beyond the portal lay a realm where science and sorcery met in careful harmony, sparkling data streams interwoven with swirling magical currents, where complex machinery hummed in synergy with ancient wards. Here, other constructs and guardians bustled about, each with its own role in safeguarding the world that existed just outside their walls. Though the gargoyle's body trembled from its injuries, it felt a curious sense of belonging as it continued deeper into the sanctum. It passed row upon row of devices reminiscent of the stolen artifact, each one carefully monitored by robed technicians. Some contraptions hovered in the air, spinning slowly amid invisible gravitational fields powered by runes etched in concentric circles. Others glowed softly with inscriptions that traced complex geometries. Alongside these wonders, the guardians themselves moved with calm purpose, a blend of modern lab coats and ceremonial attire that symbolized their dual mastery of science and magic. In the heart of the sanctum, the gargoyle found a chamber filled with radiant crystals that pulsed like living hearts. Here, one of the guardians, an older man with lines of wisdom across his face, guided the gargoyle toward a large stone platform carved with healing sigils. Whispers of incantations circled through the chamber, a low chant that resonated with the crystals in the walls. The gargoyle stood upon the platform, wings half drooping under the weight of fatigue, as gentle light enveloped its cracked surfaces. Warmth seeped into its stone skin, mending the fractures and reinvigorating the ancient essence that had lain dormant for so long. Bit by bit, the wounds began to heal, and the gargoyle's posture straightened, like a proud sentinel standing once more at the city gates. When the healing was complete, silence settled in the chamber. The gargoyle gazed at the robed guardians, each bearing a look of profound respect. They owed this stone guardian a debt. Its vigilance and sacrifice had saved the city from a catastrophe none of them might have contained on their own. As dawn truly broke in the outside world, a hush of relief seemed to resonate through every corridor of the sanctum. The city's skyline might have remained intact and unaware of what had almost transpired, but within these hidden halls, everyone understood the grave danger that had been averted. The tall woman who had led the recovery of the artifact stood beside the gargoyle. She offered a tired smile, lines of well melting into gratitude. "You have served us well," she said softly, "and you may remain among us as long as you wish. The city could use your protection. We all could." The gargoyle, despite its stony visage, conveyed a quiet acceptance. A subtle shift in its eyes signaled that the loneliness that had weighed on it for so long might finally be lifted. It was no longer isolated on a crumbling perch, caught in a world that had moved on without it. Here, in the Guardian's refuge, it found new purpose. Step by step, it moved away from the healing platform, fully aware that its days of silent watchfulness on that old cathedral spire were at an end. There was a future to shape, where ancient magic and modern innovation had to remain in careful balance. The gargoyle would be part of that, and never again alone. Even as the hidden city of wonders bustled around it, the gargoyle realized that heaven and earth had finally met in its own being. A timeless sentinel with the power to protect, living side by side with the evolving dreams of humankind. And though it might still perch high above the city from time to time, scanning the horizon for any sign of new threats, it would do so knowing its centuries-old vigil continued, and for the first time in eons, it was not a solitary duty.